So next thing we're going to be moving on to is the monitor. You may not think about the monitor too hard, but you really do need a good monitor when it comes to graphics design. And the reason is because different monitors have different specs as well. You wouldn't think about it normally, but they do. Well, you may normally think about resolution. You might go, oh, this is a 1080p monitor, LED, and this one's an OLED 4K. OLED is going to be the best one to go in that case, not because of the 4K. The 4K is an extra bonus, but OLEDs generally have better gamut range. And what gamut range is the RGB spectrum that it's able to see, the amount of that spectrum. A monitor can't display as much as we can see, but having the ability to edit with the biggest gamut range possible is going to allow you to create much more interesting pieces of work. And you'll be able to see all of these details even better than if you had a worse monitor. Because if someone's going to be looking at it with a worse monitor than your one, or someone's going to be looking at it with a better monitor than your one, then they're going to see it differently. It may only be slightly differently, but it can change the effect of your piece that you're creating. So always try and get a monitor with anti-glare for one. Extra bonus. It's always nice to be able to sit next to a window and not have it glare straight off the monitor. 2, you want IPS. 3, it's also another added bonus to IPS. But always try and go for one with IPS. And the third thing you're going to want to go for, try and go for an OLED monitor. They're expensive, but you have that higher gamut range. The fourth thing, gamut range. Go for a higher gamut range in general, because you want to be able to see a bigger spectrum of colors. Okay, now we get on to what you may think of as the less interesting part, but it's still very important in its own little way, and that is going to be the mouse. If you're going to use a mouse, some people may opt for the graphics tablet, which we're going to talk about in a minute, but we're talking about the mouse. If you're going to have a mouse, you're going to want one that's comfortable to hold in your hand. You don't want it to be too small to where it makes you sort of do a weird arcade claw. If you remember ever playing on an arcade, trying to move the massive joystick around, you ended up coming out with a weird claw-shaped hand. You don't want this. You want to have something which your hand feels like it not even can't reach across, but just has nice support on. You want a good thumb resting area, so your thumb doesn't get tired from being dragged across the surface constantly and moving around so much, because you're going to want 2 buttons on the side as well, minimum I would say. Don't go too crazy. 4 I would say is max, and that's going to be for your shortcuts, but we'll get onto that in a minute. And you're also going to want to be able to rest your hand on it and it feel very nice when you move it around. Second thing is, check when you're looking at mouses. If you can have a hold of the mouse, check all of these things, and also see how nice it is to click and press all these different buttons with. Because if it's not right for your hand, it can change the effect and the experience with the mouse. As you can see with the mouse on the screen, there is 2 buttons on the side, and as I was saying, actually there's small buttons across the top lip for your index finger. But most mice won't do that. Most of them will have it on the side where the thumb rest is, because your thumb doesn't do too much normally otherwise. And you can set shortcuts up on these mouse keys. So I recommend getting a mouse with up to 4. I would say 2 is enough for me. Forward and back on a web browser, as an example. It's a little bit more convenient than moving your mouse across the screen to do it. So try and do things that might be a little bit longer to do, such as a key command, which is Control plus on the numpad. It's very far away. You're going to have to take your hand off the mouse to do that. And if you do need to do that, try and add it to a key if it's a really important command for you and you use it a lot. I've seen people who normally have, with things like Photoshop, you can press Alt and then use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out. Some programs use Control, but I've seen some people make it so that their keys on the side go to different aspect ratios. What I mean by that is, someone is working on an aspect ratio of 4:3. then it will zoom into the perfect size because they work on the same size canvas every time when they're working with a 4x3. And if someone's working with a 16:9 canvas, they might have the other one set to that. I've seen people do that. I personally wouldn't do it myself. I don't see the use case for it. It's not a very common thing, but people do it. I'm guessing they work with different sizes all the time, though. So try and go for something that you feel comfortable with and that you can get very quickly used to. As I said, graphics tablets may be a thing people choose to use. I wouldn't blame you. I used a graphics tablet one time. It was really comfortable to use, so I would definitely recommend using a graphics tablet. So, the reason I would recommend one is, as you can see in the background, you have a pen. Sorry, that's my phone. You have a pen, and this pen is going to allow you to just make it like you're holding a pen in real life. So if you're someone who does a lot of sketching on paper, or illustrations on paper, or architectural planning on paper, and you're using graphics for these sorts of things, a graphics tablet may be your sort of thing, because it allows you to have this flexibility. So I would definitely recommend one. Also, if you get a higher end one, they will come with a strength sensitivity. So depending on how hard you push down with the pen, it will create a thicker or thinner line in programs like Photoshop, where it's supported. And this allows you to, instead of changing the size of the thing constantly or creating custom brushes, you just have the ability straight out the box. And they will also normally come with 4 or 5 buttons on the side for shortcuts. I would definitely recommend setting these up for things just like you would with your mouse, because it can play a big role in the speed in which you get things done and the comfortability and customizability of your sessions. So the next and last thing to talk about is storage. I have a picture of a portable SSD from Samsung here. The reason I have a Samsung SSD is because Samsung SSDs are very, very high end, I would say. If you're going to go for an SSD, go for a Samsung SSD. They control the process the whole way through, so they have the ability to change whatever needs to be changed whenever they need to. If something could be done better, they will do it better. Other companies such as Western Digital are also great. I've noticed that Western Digital, however, have been going a bit more down the pan as of recent, at least with their UK products. I'm not sure about the rest of the world. I'm guessing it's the same with the rest of the world though. They have been going a bit down the pan, so I would definitely recommend Samsung. But storage-wise, the thing that I mainly want to talk about is SSDs. You're not going to want to use a hard drive. Hard drives are great for archiving things, but having an SSD gives you that speed as well. You have reliability, speed, and in read and write times, and they last a long while now, and you can get them with pretty big sizes. Personally, if I was making a graphics workstation, I would have my operating system and everything on a 256GB SSD, and then have another SSD in my computer which would store all my things. So depending on how professional I am and how much I do, and if I'm keeping things for later usage or if I'm getting rid of them afterwards, I might have a 2TB SSD or a 10TB SSD. They cost a lot of money, but having storage is important, especially when you have all of these reference images downloaded. When you're going to be creating images, you're going to have multiple saves of things. You're going to be working with large files, 4K file the size of a billboard. That is immense, especially when you have 400 dpi or 600 dpi even on that image. Then, sorry, PPI you may say. I'm used to DPI, but PPI. Then it's gonna take a lot of storage because it's going to be storing a lot of information. Things like vector graphics, as you know probably, they are much more smaller in size, but in the end you're still going to need more storage. You can never have enough of it. Don't go too overboard straight away, because you may end up breaking the bank for storage, because it can get expensive pretty quickly. Another thing that I would recommend you to search up with storage, I'm not going to explain it too much, but search up NAS, N-A-S, and these are like a archive thing that you can have using like a RAID system at home. And if you don't know what RAID is, have a search up. It's a bit too much for me to explain in this one, but have a search up for what RAID is. I would definitely recommend having a NAS system if you're going to be a professional, because you have a place to archive everything that's not on your computer. So it keeps your computer free for personal stuff, while you still have the ability to work and keep things stored in a location. Obviously, the files that you're working on, you're going to have on your computer for the access and for the speed, because in a NAS you're going to have hard drives instead of SSDs, just because they have a longer lifespan and they are much better storage-wise. Still, you can get hard disks. I believe you can get hundreds of terabytes now, 200 terabytes, 500 terabytes. It's a lot. They're going to be really expensive, but being able to store that much data is really going to help in the future. So have a search up for what RAID is and what a NAS is, because these systems could be something that you might want to implement in your graphics career. So, as I said, we may speak about software, and this doesn't look like we're going to speak about software. This looks like we're going to speak about all Polaroid cameras. And while I do love a Polaroid camera, we're actually going to be speaking about software. So, I'm mainly just going to talk about some of the hardware requirements of different pieces of software. Things like Photoshop, actually the whole Adobe suite. So, the Adobe suite in itself, it's well known to be expensive for one, so it's definitely not going to be too friendly for the the guy who just wants to create a little bit here and there. That's where I recommend more open source projects such as the GNU Image Manipulation Program, GIMP, or Krita, or Krita as my graphics teacher likes to call it. Just a quick hello to him if he's watching. But you're going to want to make sure you're using the right software depending on what you can afford, for one, and what sorts of features you need. Creators more aimed towards people doing things like manga art, so and animations, things like that. The GNU Image Manipulation Program, GIMP, I should just say GIMP, it's quicker. That one's more sort of a Photoshop remake, but it's open source, free. And the great thing about having open source ones is if you need to add something in and you know how to, you can. If someone you know knows how to, they can help you to add it in. And if you need help, there's a whole community. Obviously, things like the Adobe suite have communities, but having a whole community and people who know the software in and out, and you can't get more in and out than knowing the code which makes the software work. So I would recommend these if you're an amateur, but if you're a professional or you're getting into professional level, or you can afford it and you want to just buy top tier products, then the Adobe suite is going to be something you want to pay for. You pay for each of their items individually, I believe. Packages, sorry, not items. But well worth it. Things like Illustrator and Photoshop. Photoshop's a bitmap editing software, and Illustrator is going to be your vector editing software, so depending what sorts of routes you're going. And if you're more into photography, you might want to go for things like Lightroom. Lightroom's going to be very useful for photographers. You can adjust things, contrast and everything. I believe it's a cheaper package than software than Photoshop as well, so it might be more sort of what you're going for. You may get into, if you, as I was saying before, know open source stuff and you want to do this more professionally, you may get into using XD, Adobe XD, and this is for prototyping applications, so you might find this useful as well. And that's all I have time for in this one. I think I've spent a long while speaking, so I'm not going to speak too much longer. But if you did find this useful, I'm glad I was able to help. But always try and have a bit of research behind everything as well. Don't just trust a random guy on the internet like me. Always research what you're buying before you buy it. Make sure it's fit for what you're going to be using. That's my last key point here. So I'll see you in the next one, where we're going to be talking about the legal implications. So it's going to be a bit more of a serious one than this one. Not really. I'm making the video, it's not going to be that serious, but we're going to be talking about things like copyright licenses, things like those. So hope you're ready for those.